This fish and chip shop in Fraserburgh might seem like an unlikely place to begin a video on the Scottish samurai, but the man pictured above, the man after whom that business is named, is the man, possibly more than any other, responsible for modern Japan. If you've seen the Tom Cruise film The Last Samurai, if you've heard Puccini's opera Madame Butterfly, the real life person lurking in the shadows of both was born here at 15 Commerce Street, Fraserburgh on the 6th of June 1838. If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen. In the meantime, let me tell you a story. Thomas Blake Glover was born in a middle-class Victorian North East family, the son of a Coast Guard officer here in Fraserburgh. Now, the first time that I came to Fraserburgh was to visit my future in-laws in 1988, and I'll be honest, it seemed pretty Victorian then, so God knows what it was like in Victorian times. Young Tom started school here, but when he was 6, Daddy Lieutenant Glover was posted to Grimsby. Grim by name. But 3 years later, he came back here to the northeastern Collison. Ho-ho! His dad was posted at the Coast Guard station just round the headland there. Now, they were only here for 2.5 years before moving permanently to Aberdeen. But this seems like a nice place to tell the story for now, eh? Tom did his secondary schooling in Aberdeen before joining 2 of his brothers in one of the firms in the town as a shipping clerk. Now, as luck would have it, fate was on the lookout for adventurous young lads that wanted to see the world. And at the time, she was recruiting in the Aberdeen area. So the 18-year-old lad for the northeast of Scotland headed out to Shanghai to work for Jardine Mathieson, whose insistence in selling opium to the Chinese pretty much started the Opium Wars. Now, it turns out that British gunboats persuaded the Chinese that in fact they did want to allow our opium, permit their markets to be flooded with Western goods, and would we like to control Hong Kong for a bit? How times have changed. At the time that young Glover was arrived in Shanghai, the opium dust was settling and Western powers now had their sights set on trade with the last Eastern civilization that the West hadn't penetrated, Japan. Japan had been closed to the West for 200 years. Its nominal head was the emperor and its military boss was a shogun of the Tokugawa family. Now, to avoid Western contamination, an earlier shogun had expelled Europeans back in 1648 and executed the Japanese that had converted to Christianity. Nobody was allowed in or out. If you were a European sailor and got shipwrecked on the Japanese coast, it was literally a death sentence. If you were a Japanese sailor that got blown off course and landed on the Chinese coast, that's where you now lived, because to go back was a death sentence. Isolation, though, brought its own problems for the Japanese. Whilst they remained a feudal clan society with nobody allowed to build ships that could take to sea, the countries of the West had become industrial naval powers. It was almost like the previous century's Highland Jacobite conundrum on steroids. By the 1850s, the shogun knew that he couldn't resist the military might of the West much longer, so they agreed to limited trade in 3 fixed coastal locations. But not every clan was happy with this barbarian infection, and even those that weren't entirely happy with the way that the financial cake was sliced in favour of the shogun and his clan. And it was into this mounting internal and external tension that a now 20-year-old Tom Glover was sent to help the older Scotsman, Kenneth Mackenzie, setting up Jardine Mathieson's trading agency in Nagasaki. It was off with the kilts and on with the kimonos. As it was, after less than 2 years, Mackenzie decided that the pickings had been richer back in China and he packed his bags. But young Glover threw himself into general trading and overcoming problems of tea export by setting up a drying factory. More importantly, in the tension and confusion of the will we won't we deal with Europeans, opportunities grew to sell larger ships and, more importantly, guns to the rebellious Satsuma and Choshu clans as they prepared to face up to the shogun. There may be trouble ahead. He was still exporting tea, but the real money was the illicit arms trade banned by the Japanese and British governments alike. Not only that, he was directly intriguing with those two southern clans and their rebellious activities. He was hiding rebels in his house that overlooked the port in Nagasaki. He smuggled 5 of them on board ships to go back to Britain. He paid for their transport, accommodation and education in Western methods, industry and engineering. Now, don't forget, this was punishable by death. But still, in his 20s, Glover was astutely building up allies for the future Japan that he hoped for. It was Glover who commissioned the first ever custom-designed offshore gunship that would be the backbone of the future Japanese Navy. Of course, he came to 2 of his brothers still here in Aberdeen, a shipping broker and a sea captain. The first ship was followed by an even bigger second and a third even bigger than that, all built here in the docks in Aberdeen. There were a whole host of Scottish connections. It was Scotland's Stevenson family of lighthouse builders that built Japan's lighthouses. The whole Glover family was involved in the endeavour. By the time he was finished, all of his brothers had either travelled to Japan to build the business there or worked here in Aberdeen in the Scottish arm of Japanese industrialisation. The network of trade between Aberdeen and Nagasaki was a Glover family bridge between East and West. But for Japan to stand on its own resources, he wanted its own construction docks in Nagasaki. So he had a huge dry dock built as an IKEA-style flat pack here in Aberdeen and transported, then reassembled in Nagasaki. In fact, if you go to the museum in Nagasaki today, you can still see the spare screws and Allen keys. This was the backbone of the post-industrial Japanese shipbuilding industry. When Americans dropped a nuclear bomb in Nagasaki many years later, it would be these docks that they were targeting. Over the following years, Glover continued to intrigue with the Satsuma and Choshu clans. He smuggled more of them abroad to be educated in modern industrialisation techniques. He continued to supply them with arms, shipping and any other support that he could, whilst using his home in Nagasaki as a safe house and his parents' home in Bridge of Dawn as a student hostel cum embassy. If you've seen the Hollywood film The Last Samurai, the Tom Cruise character's based on a real-life French military advisor called Jules Brunet, who stayed to fight with the shogun-loyal samurai against these new insurgent rebels. Ultimately, the much larger shogun-loyal forces fail because they're fighting with traditional old samurai technology against what was modern military equipment. Now, of course, just like Braveheart, you've got to strip out the Hollywood glitz and concertina of events to get to the truth behind the story. But when you do, you find that the modern military equipment that won the day for the incoming pro-Western regime was largely provided by Thomas Glover. And it was his activities in this civil war that earned him the name the Scottish Samurai. When the Civil War was won, Glover found himself in an influential position as he brought industrialisation to the Takashima coal mine off Nagasaki, sold the Aberdeen-built dock in Nagasaki to the new Japanese government, and drove forward the rapid industrialisation of Japan. But with the war over, he had a problem. The huge income from sales of arms and shipping couldn't quite be replaced by coal mining, tea export and peacetime activities. And it was the Japanese government that was now making money from the Nagasaki docks. And in the economically depressed period after the Civil War, the clans struggled to pay back the loans that Glover had made to them. And slowly but surely, he struggled to pay his debts. Jardine Mathieson pulled the plug and Glover & Co. ended up bankrupt. But Glover's talents were still in demand, and he was the most highly respected Westerner in Japan. Now, a fledgling shipbuilding company had plans on growing to be the giant of Japanese industry. And who better to bring on board as a roving consultant to drive its growth than Thomas Blake Glover, the Scottish samurai. He moved to the city that we call Tokyo to live in grand style as he advised that fledgling company called Mitsubishi. The young men for whom he'd risked himself were now coming back from their Western education and taking on their roles as the politicians, academics and industrialists in the new Japan. And his Tokyo home was the gathering place for those and such as those in Japanese high society. Now, I said that Glover's activities had been an inspiration behind the Madame Butterfly story, and in spite of being the illegitimate child of a Western trader and a local Japanese woman, Glover's son attended a school exclusively for the children of the Japanese emperor or peerage. After more adventures than I can cover, in 1908, at the age of 70, he was decorated by the Japanese emperor with the Order of the Rising Sun. The list of his achievements ran to 20 pages of Japanese script, including the mention of his hidden services to Japan. Some of them are covered in the book Scottish Samurai, and I'll leave a link in the description. He died 3 years after this accolade, his funeral in Tokyo, attended by Japanese government ministers, the British ambassador to Japan, the Japanese ambassador to Britain, and just about every luminary that you might imagine. Thomas Glover had been the midwife of Japan's rebirth. In a 50-year period, a boy from backwater Fraserburgh had been one of the key players in taking Japan from a perceived backward feudal clan system towards the military and industrial giant whose Aberdeen-based navy defeated China and Russia in successive wars and whose industrial might continued throughout the 20th century. Now let's be clear, as we know all too well here in Scotland, that kind of change doesn't happen without people being hurt along the way. If you're a young lad who goes off to work for an opium selling corporate, then becomes a gun running intriguer, breaks laws in your host and home countries to get things done, and the mother of your son attempts suicide when you take that son away, it's probably fair to say that you've got a darker side as well. But his Nagasaki home that survived the atomic bomb in 1945 is a major tourist attraction in Japan today. His face has been used as a brand advert for selling the biggest selling Japanese beer, as well as fish and chips, and he's still recognised as the Scottish samurai. If you'd like to find out about another Victorian Scotsman who changed the world, then there's a video coming up on screen now. In the meantime, ha mbeadh an dóchas go bia lá málaigh. Cheery and drastic.